Greetings, YouTube. I'm gonna leave the little flashing lights on in the background. I kind of like them. Um, I normally only use those in my RPG videos, but uh, I've been thinking about the fact that I've got ADHD, and it's as I read more and more about it, I've become introduced to ideas that I didn't know about. And one of the things I've stumbled upon over the course of kind of coming to grips with this is that 30 to 50% of people don't have an internal dialogue. Now, the fact that some people don't have an internal dialogue makes perfect sense. I never thought about it. It never occurred to me for one heartbeat that people didn't have an internal dialogue. I mean, now that I hear about it, and now that I begin to have serotonin in my brain, so it makes grasping things easier. Uh, it frees up, processing power for other things. It makes perfect sense that there are just some people who don't have an internal dialogue. I can't imagine what that's like, and I mean that literally. Um, it would be so easy for them to study Zen Buddhism in my book. What do you have to quiet if you don't have an internal dialogue? Um, maybe that's the key to being a great monk, that people who are drift towards that particular path because they don't have anything cluttering up the inside of their heads. Because that's what it is a lot of the time. A lot of the time it just feels like clutter. I know I live in chaos and I'm trying to make it better. Um, but it kind of, a lot of the time being inside my head's like trying to walk through a cluttered room and you're having a hard time getting in and out without tripping on something. Because it's never quiet in here. It's never, ever quiet in here. And it's just the way it's always been. But now coming to understand that that's an offshoot of what I am, who I am. And coming to understand that there are people that don't have that has been revelatory and slightly depressing. The knowledge that there are some people that just get quiet. And I'm never going to have quiet. It's always going to be full of stuff inside my head. Fortunately, sometimes it's mundane stuff, which is nothing bad about that. Though I have to watch myself from thinking about work when I'm not at work, because if I'm not at work, why the hell am I thinking about work? I work in a factory. Thinking about work when I'm not there serves no purpose other than to chew up brain power and generate potential anxiety for no reason. So whenever I start thinking about work when I'm not at work, I stop myself. So let's go think about something else, because it doesn't help me in the least. Sometimes I think about these. I practiced these in my head. I didn't practice this one particularly. This kind of popped into my head that I wanted to talk about it. But I know that I have thought about the concept of doing a video at some point about the fact that it's never quiet in my head. I just hadn't gotten to the point of beginning to rehearse it. And I do, in fact, rehearse my videos, not just in my head, but sometimes if I'm working completely by myself, I do it out loud. Just getting the feel for how it, sounds in my head and how it feels on my lips and in my throat, the mouth feel of the words. I also do a really wonderful diabolical laugh. But I practice videos, but I also practice dialogue for every conversation I've ever had with anybody ever that I knew was coming. Not spontaneous conversations. I'm okay with those. I can talk about pretty much any topic with anybody if I feel that they're worthy of my time. That may sound judgmental, but for example, I don't have any desire to chit-chat with red caps. Somebody's wearing one of those red caps, and I'm not going to be having small talk with him, regardless of how much, we may have in common on certain interests. But I practice dialogue all the time. Sometimes dozens and dozens of times before I get around to doing a video or I get around to having a conversation with somebody. And sometimes I'm having those conversations with specific people like my therapist or my wife or a friend of mine or this camera. That sometimes I'm having conversations with people that don't exist. Not that I'm talking to, alternate personalities, but just characters in my head. The generic listener. And it kind of I almost kind of see like a generic formless being there, someone without like this, generic with a capital G human that I'm talking to. Sometimes it's a generic role. It's the generic person I'm training at work, or it's the generic inspector who's asking questions about what I'm doing, or it's the genetic man on the generic man on the street, that kind of thing. I mean, I do it all the time. And the fact that there are people that don't do that they aren't practicing everything over and over and over and over again, that there's not this constant dialogue inside their skull, is kind of astounding. I work on designs in my head, and thanks to serotonin, I've been able to save myself so much work. Because now when I think about designs, I'm literally doing like 3D modeling in my head. I'm looking at things from every angle. I'm perceiving which avenues of thought makes sense, and well, no, that doesn't make sense to do it this way. If I do it this way, I save materials. If I do it this way, I save myself effort because it means I'm combining, two tasks. Or if I do it in this order, it will be, lower complexity and increase my chances of not making a mistake or wasting materials and time. Because a lot of time the materials I'm working with are free, things I've scavenged, but still my time has value. And if I'm wasting it, it's kind of frustrating because I'm not getting to the result I want. And like everybody else, even though I enjoy the process, I still want to get to the result. Um, but even that, which I consider to be okay, I think it's all right for me to have those particular thoughts and those particular ways of viewing the world. The knowledge that there are folks that don't do that, that they may plan ahead when they thinking about a specific thing, but they're not doing that kind of modeling, that kind of conversation in their skull, that internal dialogue thing. It's just a wild thought. And it's weird that I will never understand it. I mean, as a philosophical idea, maybe to a certain extent, but I'm never going to stand it on a visceral level, on a gut level, because I'm never going to experience it. I once heard someone describe the use of heroin as that sensation as you're falling to sleep, and just as you like you're literally kind of like you finally start to drift into that state as you're going down, and that's that really warm, comfortable kind of, and then you're gone. That heroin is that, but extended over time. And when somebody explained it to me like that, I was like, hey, wow, that kind of makes me understand what the attraction is. Not that I have done heroin or want to do heroin, I do not. But when explained in that way, couched in those terms, suddenly it became understandable for me because I've had that experience, that you drifting off to sleep. So making that comparison helped me understand, but I've never had the quiet and here experience. And it's much harder for me to imagine what that's like. So if anybody who's listening to this, still listening to it, actually doesn't have an internal dialogue, what's it like? Tell me about it. I want to hear it. I want to know. Because it's something I'll never experience. And knowing that it's outside my grasp is a little frustrating for me because I'm a data junkie. So I want to hear about it. And if I can get some folks to talk to me through here, cool. I may have to go do some research. But it would also be like nice to get the anecdotal experiences of people who actually have that way of viewing the world. talking to a person about something who that experiences it is a heck of a lot different than just going and doing research. So let's talk about our internal dialogues, if they exist, about how our brains don't ever shut down sometimes if you suffer from certain kinds of mental disabilities or mental illness. And there isn't any reason that we should be ashamed to talk about these things because they're just there. They're things. Talking about them makes them become more normal, and it's okay to talk about them, and there's no shame. So let's talk about what goes on inside our heads or doesn't go on inside our heads. I want to know.